The attempted exorcism of Kennedy Ife. Our first story begins in Hadley Wood, London, a suburb in the borough of Enfield in the north of Greater London, in August of 2016. A 26-year-old man named Kennedy Ife began acting strangely on the morning of August 19th. He complained of a pain in his throat and began to exhibit aggressive behavior outside of his normal demeanor. These aggressive episodes continued to escalate to the point where he bit his own father. Kennedy started to make threats of self-mutilation, including a claim that he would cut off his own genitals. Kennedy continued to show clear signs of mental illness, and the situation progressed. He began complaining about a seed in his stomach. This claim evolved into a belief that he had a python or snake inside of him, and he needed to get rid of it. And finally, this became a conviction of demonic possession. Kennedy's family was convinced that this snake creature inside of Kennedy was a demon, and it was this belief that started a string of actions that would ultimately lead to Kennedy's death. Through the use of excessive force, necessary given Kennedy's new aggressive tendencies, the family was able to physically restrain Kennedy using cable ties, rope, and handcuffs. In a situation that would typically have led to the involvement of the authorities, the Ife family decided to take matters into their own hands and attempt to cure Kennedy through prayer. The family held deep religious beliefs and were connected with the Jesus Sanctuary Ministries in southeast London. On August 22nd, Kennedy became very agitated and had developed breathing issues after nearly 70 hours of restraint as his family attempted to free him of his demonic oppressor, and his brother finally called emergency services after Kennedy began complaining about dehydration. But it was too late. When emergency services arrived, they found the family attempting a resurrection ritual in an attempt to raise Kennedy from his very recent death from cardiac arrest. The prayer and restraint that were meant to cure him had taken his life, and he was pronounced dead at 10:17 a.m. The family was brought to trial on charges of manslaughter, false imprisonment, and causing or allowing the death of a vulnerable adult. During the trial, jurors were shown chilling footage from a police body cam as they arrived on the scene, and the family can be seen gathered around Kennedy's body chanting things like, "He is released right now in the name of Jesus. No corpse shall be taken from this place because there is no corpse in this place. We call that name back to the land of the living in the name of Jesus." A pathologist found more than 60 injuries on Kennedy's body, which had been caused by the forceful restraint. A book about how to conduct exorcism titled Anger, Madness, and the Demonic was found in the Ife home, and a bag containing hundreds of cable ties, rope, and handcuffs was found in their neighbor's garden. In March of 2019, the trial finally ended, and all family members were cleared of all charges in the death of Kennedy Ife. But the question remains in the minds of many who were close to the case. What really happened to Kennedy? Was there really a demon that eventually got exactly what it wanted? And would things have ended differently if the authorities had been brought in early, rather than Kennedy's family taking matters into their own faithful hands? Florida Devil Worship. In June of 2012, Danielle Harkins, a 35-year-old school teacher at the Lealman and Asian Neighborhood Family Center near St. Petersburg, Florida, began acting strangely. Shortly before that, Danielle had gone through some significant personal issues, including a messy divorce and custody battle. Despite these challenges in her life, Danielle appeared to be coping well and was living a good, normal life, Until, that is, she began to change. In June of 2012, Danielle's behavior began to change in ways that were very out of character for those who knew her. According to those in her social circles, Danielle had always been a calm, kind woman with little to no religious affiliation. Now, suddenly, she was beginning to display an almost extremist religious belief system, which involved an obsessive interest in demons and angels. A neighbor and good friend of Danielle's named Lisa claimed that Danielle showed up at their house unexpectedly one day just to let them know that she was okay and didn't have any demons. But strange random acts such as this were only the beginning of a very dark path that Danielle had started down, and nobody could have predicted what would happen next. On the night of June 9th, 2012, Danielle brought together a group of her teenage students near the St. Petersburg Pier. The students were not fully aware of what was going on and were confused as Danielle built a small fire. She tended the fire in complete silence until all 7 students, 6 boys and 1 girl, had arrived. It was then, once all of them were together, that Danielle broke her silence and announced to her students that they had all been infested by demons, and she had to perform an exorcism to rid them of these demons. It is unclear what was going through the students' minds as Danielle began a ritual with chanting and dancing around the fire. The next phase of the ritual took things to a much more disturbing place as Danielle attempted to convince the students to perform self-mutilating acts on themselves by cutting to release the demons inside of them. Naturally, the students were not okay with this and refused to take part any further. In a refusal to accept the students' position, Danielle took it upon herself to begin a series of terrifying acts of violence. She doused one student's hand in perfume and lit it on fire, causing second-degree burns. She cut deep into a second student's back and another's neck with a broken bottle. She then heated a metal key until it was red hot and used the key to cauterize the wounds. Whether it was out of fear or shock, she was then able to convince the remaining students to cut themselves and cauterize their own wounds as well to keep the demons from returning. Imagine the mind of a child and what must have been going through their heads as they found themselves in this horrifying position with an adult that they trusted. Despite this being such a traumatic experience with severe injuries, none of the students openly came out and brought Danielle's actions into the public eye. One of the students texted a friend about what happened. That friend told their parents about it, and they informed the parents of the boy who sent the original text, who ultimately contacted the authorities. Danielle Harkins was arrested, and even then, the students, victims of the horrific ritual performed by their teacher, would not speak about the events that took place. Is it possible that Danielle played a part in preparing the students for how to handle it should anyone find out what happened? But it is surprising, especially given the fact that at least one of them texted a friend about it, that they would maintain a vow of silence about such a disturbing event. Perhaps it was just the overwhelming trauma of the situation. Perhaps they still held a loyalty to their teacher who had been there for them for so long before it happened. Or perhaps Danielle had managed to terrify them into submission with threats of what would happen if they ever opened their mouths. Danielle also maintained very tight lips about what had taken place. Her responses and explanations were very vague when she was questioned about what religion she was involved with and why she carried out the ritual that night, or even exactly what had taken place. As a result, the full story of what else might have taken place on that night is still unknown. Danielle Harkins was found guilty of 1 count of child abuse and 1 count of aggravated battery. She lost her job and served a 6-month prison sentence. Since her release, Danielle seems to have disappeared off the face of the earth. No one knows what has become of her or where she has gone. Perhaps we will never fully understand what drove this once caring educator to such a dark place. Perhaps the devastation of her failed marriage and the custody battle had caused her such distress that she suffered a mental break, or found herself in such a vulnerable position that she was able to be sucked into a dark religion in hopes of finding purpose. Or maybe it was Danielle all along who had been overcome by a demon. It is believed that demonic possession is most prevalent in the weak-minded and vulnerable, and after going through such despair in her personal life, Danielle would certainly have fit into that category. In any case, we can only hope that wherever she is, Danielle has found peace and is not searching for the next victim of her dark rituals. The true story behind The Exorcist. Every great fictional story has an inspiration based in reality, some to a greater extent than others. In the case of The Exorcist, one of the most terrifying stories of demonic possession of all time, the inspiration might be even more frightening than the famous work of fiction. The real story began in the late 1940s as a 13-year-old boy named Roland Hunkeler was mourning the loss of his Aunt Harriet. Harriet, also referred to as Aunt Tilly, had passed away of multiple sclerosis on January 26th of 1949, and it is important to note that Harriet had a deep interest in spiritualism and had actually introduced Roland to the workings of the Ouija board, a tool believed to allow communication with beings that live beyond our view of reality, including demons. Strange occurrences actually started happening prior to the death of Roland's aunt, and it's possible that their explorations with the Ouija board could have opened their home to attack from dark forces. Given this nature of their relationship, it is not a far throw to the possibility that Roland may have also used the mysterious board in an attempt to connect with his aunt after she passed away, thereby widening the opening between our world and the next. While his intentions would have been innocent and understandable in a state of grief, re-engaging with the Ouija board could have allowed whatever dark entity had leaked into their home to enter Roland himself, leading to everything that happened after, although no one has ever confirmed that this took place. Roland's aunt wasn't the only influential member of his family to embrace a love of spirituality. His mother and grandmother have both been described as fanatically religious. Roland himself was characterized as being far from a normal child. According to a case study by Kyle T. Cobb Jr. titled The Exorcism of Roland Hunkeler, Roland was prone to tantrums and frequently showed violent tendencies and exhibited sadistic behavior to animals and people around him. The following is a researched timeline as documented in the same case study referenced above. A link to this study and the information outlined below is included in the description of this video. January 15th, 1949. The beginning. A dripping noise is heard in Roland's grandmother's room by both Roland and his grandmother. A picture of Christ on the wall begins to shake, and scratching noises are heard under the floorboards. These scratching sounds do not stop on this night, but rather they continue for 10 days between the hours of 7 p.m. and midnight. At the time, the family attributed these sounds to a rodent. January 26, 1949. Aunt Tilly Harriet dies of multiple sclerosis in St. Louis. Roland's grandmother experiences a strange sensation, as if waves of air are repeatedly striking her. 3 knocks are heard at the door to their home, but no one is at the door. Mrs. Hunkeler, Roland's mother, asks, "If you are Harriet, tell me positively by knocking 4 times. Subsequently, 4 knocks are heard on the door. more scratching sounds are heard on Roland's mattress. January 28, 1949. After 3 days of silence, no strange occurrences, things begin again as the sound of squeaking shoes on Roland's bed are heard for 6 nights in a row. February 17, 1949. A Lutheran minister named Schultz spends the night at the Hunkeler home. During his time there, Schultz hears scratching noises and witnesses multiple unexplainable events, including Roland's bed vibrating, a chair tipping over as Roland sat in it, and stacks of blankets moving on their own. Schultz directs the Hunkelers to take Roland to the mental hygiene clinic of the University of Maryland for testing. Roland was subject to 2 rounds of testing, and nothing abnormal was discovered. Schultz contacts B. Rhine, the founder of the parapsychology laboratory at Duke University. Rhine and his wife Louisa drive up from North Carolina to evaluate the boy. They do not experience any of the strange activity during their visit. February 26, 1949. Scratches and markings begin appearing on Roland's body. This happens for 4 consecutive nights. February 27, 1949. Words start appearing, with the markings appearing to have been scratched into his skin by claws. Father Edward Albert Hughes of the St. James Catholic Church in Mount Rainier is called to review Roland's case. Hughes recommends that the Hunkeler family use blessed candles, holy water, and special prayers. While in the Hunkelers' home, Hughes witnessed Roland making obscene and blasphemous remarks at him in a strange, diabolical voice, and the room became suddenly and unexplainably cold. Following his visit to the Hunkeler residence, Hughes witnessed the telephone and other objects in his office moving on their own. It is at this point that Father Hughes became convinced that Hunkeler was possessed and requested authorization by Cardinal Patrick A. O'Boyle for Hughes to perform an exorcism. February 28, 1949 through March 3, 1949. Roland is currently a patient at the Georgetown University Hospital. It was here that the purported first exorcism took place. Roland's mother sees the bloody word Louis scratched in his body. When they question the boy about the word and whether or not it is referring to St. Louis, it is said that the word yes then appeared on Roland's body in response. The Hunkeler family then departed for Normandy, Missouri, near St. Louis, to stay at the home of an aunt. March 8, 1949. Frightening things continue to happen in the aunt's home in Normandy. Roland's mattress shakes and the scratching sounds resume. March 9, 1949. Father Raymond J. Bishop of St. Louis University sees Roland for the first time. During this visit, Bishop witnesses the scratching of Roland's body as well as the shaking mattress. March 11, 1949. Father William S. Bodern of St. Francis Xavier Church asks to meet with Roland. Father Bodern reads the novena prayer of St. Francis Xavier, blesses Roland with a relic, and places a crucifix under the boy's pillow. When everyone has left the room, a loud noise is heard and reportedly a large bookcase has moved on its own. A bench has turned over and the crucifix has been moved to the edge of the bed. Roland's mattress begins shaking again. March 16, 1949. Archbishop Joseph E. Ritter gives Father Bodern permission to begin a formal rite of exorcism. This will be the first of a second series of exorcisms that will be performed in the home at Normandy, Missouri. A number of priests are in attendance, including Bodern as chief exorcist, Reverend Walter Halloran as assistant exorcist. It is noted here that Halloran was removed before the final exorcism. Father Lawrence Kennedy and Father Charles O'Hara of Marquette University. During the exorcism, Roland becomes violent, spits at the priest, howls and growls, the bed shakes violently, and allegedly the words Satan and devil appear scratched into Roland's chest. When the exorcism proves too violent to be continued in the home, they move Roland to the rectory at St. Francis Xavier Church. When this also proves too dangerous, Roland is transferred to the Alexian Brothers Hospital and placed in the psychiatric ward. Exorcisms continue at the hospital. April 1st, 1949. Roland is officially baptized as a Catholic. April 4th, 1949. During a brief trip back to Maryland by train, Roland becomes violent and attacks Father Bodern, kicking him in the genitals. April 9th, 1949. Roland is returned to St. Louis and briefly stays at White House, which is a Jesuit retreat along the Mississippi River near St. Louis. Here, Roland attempts to commit suicide by throwing himself over a bluff into the river, but the act is prevented by Father Halloran. Roland is then returned to the Alexian Brothers Hospital and placed in the psychiatric ward where he is restrained. Catholic communion is refused. April 18th, 1949. The final exorcism of Roland Hunkeler takes place. At 11 p.m., while wearing saint medals and holding a crucifix, Roland screams, "Satan, Satan, I am Saint Michael. I command you, Satan, and the other evil spirits to leave this body, in the name of Dominus, immediately. Now, now, now!" And after one final spasm, Roland falls quiet and proclaims, "He is gone." After the final exorcism was concluded, Roland claimed to have seen a vision of Saint Michael slaying a dragon, and he interpreted this as a sign that the possession was over. 12 days later, the Hunkellers returned home. The strange experiences never happened again. Roland returned to school. The last confirmed report of Roland Hunkeler came in 2006, when he was cited for a seatbelt violation, appeared in court in Ellicott City, Maryland, and paid a small fine. In 1949, following the events outlined here, Brother Rector Cornelius sealed the 5th floor corridor of the Alexian Brothers Hospital where the exorcism took place after the statue of St. Michael was removed. The room where Ronald stayed, along with a copy of a diary from which most of the details of this account were drawn, remained locked away here until the old wing of the hospital was scheduled to be demolished. It was then, in October of 1978, when workers clearing out furniture that had been stored in this wing discovered the official record of the exorcisms that took place over 4 nights in 1949. Thank you to everyone for listening to this episode of True Nightmares. Resources used to gather these stories are linked in the description of the episode. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next video. If you enjoyed these true tales of the paranormal, please hit the thumbs up on this video and leave us a comment letting us know which one was your favorite. Let us know if you or anyone you know has ever been unfortunate enough to experience some form of perceived demonic possession. Follow us on social media. We are at Have Happy Nightmares on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. We are at YT Happy Nightmare with no E on the end on Twitter. We'll see you in the next video for more of the creepy content you crave. So come back soon and, as always, happy nightmares.